The baseline institutional illusion dictates that raw production automatically equates to corporate value. This is a naive operational error. In the hyper-competitive architecture of the modern matrix, unstaged value does not exist. The corporate hierarchy does not reward the silent exhaustion of the engine room. It rewards the strategic curation of the narrative. When you execute flawless, heavy-lifting tasks in complete isolation, the system categorizes your output as a free, baseline utility. True corporate leverage belongs exclusively to those who understand that value is not merely delivered, it is theatrically staged. If your contribution is not actively managed, framed, and injected into the executive consciousness, your hard work is mathematically invisible. Welcome to the audit of the perception premium. The corporate landscape is littered with hyper-competent professionals who naively believe their quiet output speaks for itself. This assumption creates a dangerous production void where unstaged labor becomes mechanically invisible to upper management. In the cold math of corporate metrics, if an executive cannot see, touch, or easily conceptualize your contribution within their narrow attention span, it simply does not exist. While you sit in the shadows executing complex tasks and stabilizing the engine room, your lack of self-curated visibility allows less capable, politically active peers to claim ownership of the department's momentum. By refusing to step into the spotlight and frame your results, you reduce your cognitive brilliance to a baseline expected service. The system takes your flawless execution for granted, absorbing your energy without ever recording your name on the promotion ledger. To avoid this void, you must stop producing in silence and start engineering visibility. Exceptional career acceleration is rarely about the objective volume of your work. It is about mastering the theater of execution. Corporate stagecraft demands that you stop treating your job as a checklist of tasks and start treating it as a curated performance for the executive suite. Every project update, cross-departmental email, and boardroom presentation must be highly optimized to convey elite leadership capability. Instead of quietly delivering a finished product behind closed doors, you must choreograph the entire process, highlighting complex structural obstacles you overcame, the strategic risks you mitigated, and the revenue impact you secured. When you wrap your daily output in this theatrical framework, you instantly shift how you are perceived by decision makers. You transition from an anonymous technical laborer into a high-status corporate architect whose presence in the room feels absolutely necessary. Stop grinding invisibly and start directing the corporate narrative around your absolute execution. True institutional authority belongs exclusively to those who master narrative arbitrage, the calculated manipulation of how your intellectual scale and professional scarcity are perceived. In any hierarchy, an asset that is infinitely available and easily understood is viewed as cheap and entirely replaceable. To break this trap, you must rewrite the story surrounding your output. Frame your specialized knowledge as a rare, highly complex resource that requires immense cognitive depth to execute. When reporting on your tasks, use the sophisticated language of executive decision-making, focusing on risk hedging, operational velocity, and capital optimization rather than raw technical labor. By elevating the linguistic scale of your communications, you create an intellectual barrier that prevents mediocre managers from micromanaging your day-to-day workflow. This strategic framing forces the institution to view your bandwidth as an expensive luxury, driving up your personal currency and forcing stakeholders to negotiate on your terms. Many top-tier performers remain permanently trapped because they allow themselves to be anchored to the operational floor. They spend their limited cognitive energy solving low-level procedural crises, believing this makes them indispensable. In reality, it merely brands them as permanent infrastructure. To break free, you must practice aggressive status anchoring, deliberately detaching your identity from raw implementation and hooking it directly onto high-value influence nodes. This requires you to actively insert yourself into cross-functional steering committees, dominate high-stakes strategic initiatives, and align your daily conversations with the overarching long-term vision of the executive suite. Stop volunteering for invisible behind-the-scenes cleanup and position yourself exclusively where corporate power is visibly exercised. When you anchor your presence on the bridge alongside key decision makers rather than down in FERDs, the boiler room, the matrix is forced to recognize you as a peer and a natural candidate for vertical promotion. The brutal, unvarnished reality of organizational advancement is that tactical presentation will always trump raw implementation. The corporate matrix does not possess the time, bandwidth, or desire to audit the deep technical accuracy of your labor. It relies entirely on the visibility multiplier to determine who deserves the next vertical leap. A mediocre project that is beautifully packaged, eloquently articulated, and strategically pitched to the right executive stakeholders will always generate 10 times more corporate leverage than a flawless piece of work delivered in total isolation. When you ignore the presentation layer, you are effectively leaving your professional equity on the table for corporate parasites to steal. You must treat the framing of your work with the exact same intellectual rigor you apply to the actual execution. Stop assuming that the quality of your output can speak for itself across a crowded, noisy corporate landscape. Every slide, every briefing document, and every verbal status report must be meticulously engineered to showcase your strategic foresight and leadership readiness. By weaponizing this multiplier, you ensure that every ounce of your energy is amplified into high-status influence, forcing the upper echelons of power to acknowledge your undeniable trajectory. In the high-stakes game of corporate chess, actual stagnation is secondary to the catastrophic impact of perceived stagnation. Executive leadership teams are deeply attracted to forward momentum. They naturally route promotions, critical funding, and high-status opportunities toward financiers are deeply individuals who appear to be on an unassailable upward trajectory. To exploit this institutional bias, you must master the art of perceived velocity, the kishta systematic curation of an image of infinite professional momentum. This means you must never appear stagnant, overwhelmed, or buried under the baseline maintenance of your department. Even when your day-to-day work involves routine operational tasks, the narrative you present to the outside world must signal continuous evolution, intellectual expansion, and strategic scaling. Regularly showcase new high-level frameworks you have developed, publicize the successful completion of micro-milestones, and voice bold, forward-looking insights during critical briefings. When you control this perception, you create a psychological gravity well that pulls executive stakeholders into your orbit. They begin to view your vertical rise not as a distant possibility, but as an absolute inevitability that they must support or risk being left behind. By engineering this illusion of perpetual acceleration, you completely decouple your career growth from the slow, bureaucratic timelines of the legacy system. You establish yourself as a dominant, high-yield sovereign force within the company, compelling the hierarchy to accelerate your access to capital, authority, and executive command on your own aggressive timeline.